Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talos of Tag Live on Twitch. We've got more screen sizes to deal with. There's a lot of times in the past where I've heard about a new iPad screen size, and I always doubted at first because I'm like, really? They cannot make up their mind with the iPad screen sizes. They're all over the place, but then half the time, in fact, more than half the time, they end up being right. So I'ma just run with this one and just take it and just say, you know what, it's probably real. I remember the first time, like the first iPad, obviously 9.7 inches. Then iPad Pro came out, 12.9 inches. iPad Mini, 7.9 inches. Screen sizes all over the place. Then I remember reading about the 10.5 inch iPad and thinking, whoa, this is something else. This is different. Okay, weird. And then 10.2 inch iPad. I'm like, okay, slightly bigger than 9.0. Okay, 10.2 inch iPad come out. Now Ming Chi Kuo comes out today, gives us two new screen sizes for the iPad, none of which are from previous generations. We got 10.8 inch iPad and 9 inch iPad. Ugh. It just keeps getting worse. They just keep dropping more. Holy crap. DJ Thornton 98, thank you for the tier 2 subscription. 21-month streak. Holy crap. Oh, I'm at the drinking month. You reached 21. Thank you, DJ. Appreciate that's way too much support. I don't know why you've been supporting me that long. But thank you, Pizza Man. 135 bits. Appreciate that as well. The real question is whether the 10.8 inch iPad is the new budget iPad or a new Air. Yeah, that 10.8 feels like a big jump from 10.2. That's a 0.6 inch increase in display size. So that would have to be a new form factor, right? There's no way they can bring 10.8 inch to the same form factor, even with thinner bezels, as the 10.2 inch iPad. I feel like that's too much. So, sounds like an iPad Mini and a budget iPad with smaller bezels. I personally disagree. I think this is the iPad Air, and I think it's going to be very similar to the 11-inch iPad Pro because 10.8 inches versus 11 inches is basically there. I'm wondering if they're developing an iPad display that's similar to the iPad Pros, but maybe the bezel is like slightly thicker. It wouldn't take much. It would just be like zero point 0.1 inches thicker around the edges, which would barely be noticeable unless you held the two right next to each other. But it would basically still look like the current iPad Pros, but it would still not have a home button. It would still be 60 hertz. And maybe Apple found this sweet spot of like, okay, if we shrink the display panel by zero point 0.2 inches, we're able to manufacture it for a lot cheaper. There's always like they recycle old designs, but they're willing to tinker things a little bit. You know, with the iPhone SE, they moved the Apple logo down. I'm sure that didn't cost them nothing, but it was probably a simple design tweak. And there was a lot of small design changes between the 2017 iPad Pro and the iPad Air 3. So there were little things though, like the iPad Air does not have a camera bump, whereas the 2017 iPad Pro did. So I imagine the iPad Air 4 will not have a camera bump either because it'll have a very basic, very simple camera, nothing too fancy with the rear-facing camera. Um, let's see. 4 bits from Overachiever. I missed live stream, but I was thinking the other day that I totally forgot. When I took off my 2019 AirPods case, I ordered my AirPods to be engraved to say "Rip AirPower 2019." Oh, that's funny. You said a joke for yourself in the future. Please let the 9-inch be a Mini Pro 120 hertz. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Apple's definitely relating and understanding that some people want smaller devices. You know, like they're making the iPhone 12, which is a 5.4-inch display, but still has Face ID, still has the thin bezel, still has 5G A14 chip. And now it sounds like they're working on a next generation new design, which, by the way, iPad Mini design has like never changed. The biggest thing the iPad Mini ever got over the years was Touch ID one year. It was like, hey, we have Touch ID. That was it. That was like the biggest upgrade they ever brought to the iPad Mini. So this is the first time they would actually be changing possibly the form factor. It's not clear whether or not this would involve the exact same footprint as the last iPad Mini. Knowing how Apple has been with iPads in the past, I imagine it's just going to be slightly bigger. It's going to be the form factor of an iPad Mini, but slightly bigger, but with the iPad Pro thin bezel design, which I wanted for the longest time. I think that would be a really popular model. In fact, if it has cellular support, it could probably end up replacing a lot of people's phones. It's just a shame it doesn't support Apple Watch. Barbecue Pringle, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you for that name, by the way. That's an awesome name. At what point is screen size classified a tablet? I don't even think it has much to do with the screen size. Obviously, it partially has something to do with the size, but I think it has more to do with the aspect ratio. Because 6.5 inch display on a 4:3 aspect ratio is a very different display than 6.5 inch on, something like an 11 Pro Max. Because when you have a taller, narrower design, it's more pocketable, it's more one-handed friendly. Whereas when you go into tablet territory, yeah, you can hold it with one hand, but you can't use it with one hand. So the iPad mini is still tablet territory, but it's definitely on the smaller end. But yeah, I think aspect ratio has more to do with it than necessarily like. Because I get it. Phones are getting up to 7 inches and tablets are getting kind of small. But not this one. It's going to be a mini iPad with a 9-inch display, which is almost the size as the original iPad's display. What if we're all wrong and we just get 2 new iPad lines? Oh my god. No, Scott, we can't have any more iPad lines. There's too many. If anything, we need to start ditching some of them. iPad Air would probably be the first one to go, but yeah. Let's see. 10.8 inch is just because rounded corners, depending on the display manufacturer. They might call it 10.8 inch. Remember that Cool gets his leaks from supply chain? Maybe. I mean, what was his name? Mac Takara said that there was an 11-inch iPad Air coming later this year. Now Quo is saying 10.8-inch iPad. So we're getting we're getting in the ballpark here. So my interpretation of this is it's a slightly design tweaked iPad Pro from 2018. Maybe it's more tweaked than we think. Maybe it could be something like thicker, because perhaps part of the expensive part of manufacturing an iPad Pro involves a lot of the getting the aluminum and getting the design that thin. So maybe in order to redesign it, they had to shrink the panel a little bit, the display panel a little bit. Maybe it's a tad bit thicker, so there's no camera bump, but the camera's still not great. Again, it would just be 60 hertz. Probably rock something like an A12 chip, nothing fancy. But again, just for those who want iPad Pro design without the tech specs, it would be available for them. At $500, I think that would be a great selling iPad. Let's see. Screen classified from. You're not. Don't spam the chat, please. Please let 9-inch. I would. Honestly, at the same time though, who asked that? 8-bit Matt. I do agree with you, 8-bit Matt. I would love the idea of making an iPad Pro just at an extremely small footprint because, like I've said in the past, iPad Pro, that's my favorite Apple product. I want every Apple product to be more like that. Bring more 120 hertz, bring more USB-C, bring more Face ID, bring more Face ID that works from all angles. Like, make the iMac more like the iPad. So if they're willing to add to the Pro lineup and make a mini Pro, I know that's probably very niche, but like at the same time, we're hearing about the iPhone lineup now, and it sounds like the Pro iPhones get the big displays and the budget iPhones get the smaller displays, which makes me think, yeah, they probably aren't going to make a mini Pro just because it's too niche. And I mean, the mini Pro, I don't think it could even sustain a Magic Keyboard case using have you seen those third-party accessories, the Bluetooth keyboard cases that go with the iPad mini? My God, that thing is tiny. My goodness, that thing is tiny. But no, genuinely, if they released, I know it's not likely, but if they released an iPad Pro mini, 9-inch display, but it still has 120 hertz, still has Face ID, has USB-C. At that point, might as well just ditch the iPhone and just take your iPad Pro Mini everywhere you go. Let's see. Where's CoinX when we need him? I know CoinX verifying this would be very helpful. I agree. What happened to micro LED? It's been over a year since the last report. I don't know. I imagine Apple's been researching it and maybe found out that mini LED was more practical and offered a lot of the same benefits or something like that. I don't know. I used an iPad mini keyboard case before. I wouldn't recommend it. I know, dude. Those iPad mini keyboard cases are freaking tiny. So maybe if they made an iPad Pro mini, it wouldn't have a smart connector. Just because making keyboard accessories for a tablet that small. By the way, Apple doesn't make any, in case you were curious. They don't make any keyboard attachments for the iPad mini. They do make folio covers and smart covers that you can cover the display with and prop it up, but not anything with a keyboard. It'll completely replace the iPhone. It would be a little too big to replace an iPhone. 4:3 aspect ratio, that would probably not fit in most people's pockets, but it would fit in some. It would basically be the 12 Pro Max Max. It would be the Max version of the Max phone. Will you buy the Pixel 4a when it comes out? Maybe. I'm kind of surprised. Every time I read about the Pixel 4a, I'm like, wait, is that not out yet? I remember reviewing the iPhone SE and people were referring to the Pixel 4a like it was already out. Did you guys see that thing? Did you guys see that? People were like, well, the Pixel 4a has a better display and a better camera. And I'm like, they haven't even announced that yet. Maybe it's because of all those comments. I kept reading comments of people saying, like, Pixel 4a versus iPhone SE. And I'm like, one of these things isn't out. But so many people kept referring to it, I thought it was out. But then I see another report. It's like Pixel 4a leaked wallpapers. And I was like, wait, is it not? When are they going to announce this thing? Let's see. I have an iPad Mini 2 and I got a Bluetooth keyboard. I hate it. It's like typing on a baby's computer. Did you watch Unbox Therapy's video on Apple not sending review units to him? He sent some email to them. No, I don't watch Unbox Therapy, but I heard about that video, which sounded hilarious. It reminds me why I don't watch him, because I think that's stupid. I remember him criticizing them, saying, like, I'm going to review the iPhone 10 in a biased way because they didn't send me one. That was like the whole intro of his Don't Buy the iPhone 10 video, or one of his iPhone 10 videos. I just remember him going on a big rant about how he didn't get sent one, so that's going to impact his opinion of the phone. And I was like, really? You're going to let that affect your recommendation? If the budget iPad is getting a way newer chip and possibly a redesign, do you think we will finally see a laminated display? It sucks that it's still not laminated. That's a good question. I agree that it sucks that it's not laminated, but that's kind of what makes it so cheap. If it wasn't laminated, I don't see why. That's the problem with the iPad lineup. It's too complicated right now. They got mini, budget iPad, iPad Air, and iPad Pro. And one of the biggest differentiating factors that separates the iPad Air from the budget iPad is that laminated display. The CPU, it's not that big a difference. I mean, A12 chip is obviously faster than the A10 chip, but they've had the A10 chip on 2 generations of the budget iPad. So if they do another budget iPad, they would have to they would have to do something, I think, with the CPU. I already think it's kind of dated that it's 2020 and they're still shipping a brand new Apple product with an A10 chip. Like, how many more years of support is that thing really going to be getting? You know, I'm sure it'll be like 2 or 3 years, but still, like, the fact that they're selling that new right now makes me worried. So I feel like the laminated display is not great, but if they remove it and they just give it a normal laminated display, iPad Air becomes pointless. Nobody's going to buy the iPad Air, which is why my theory is that they're going to do the Air first. Or maybe they'll launch a new budget iPad alongside the iPad Air 4 when it drops. So I'm not a leaker. I don't have sources or anything like that. This is just personal guess. I think they'll launch the iPad Air 4 and it'll look and resemble the 2018 iPad Pro. It'll look very similar to that. You know what I just thought? The 11-inch iPad Pro is not a 4:3 aspect ratio. It's slightly taller. So what if the iPad Air 4 is actually a 4:3 aspect ratio, and that's why it's a 10.8-inch display? Maybe that's what it is. That could be right, but on the sad note of that, it would mean it wouldn't support Magic Keyboard cases because it would be a slightly different form factor. Anyway, so my theory is they'll refresh the iPad Air 4. It'll look a lot like the iPad Pro with dumbed-down specs, and at the same time, that's when they update the budget iPad with either A11 chip or something like that, and laminated display perhaps, but it will still have the basic design of home button, Touch ID, chin and forehead. Maybe it'll stick with the 10.2 inches, or maybe they'll just move over the old iPad Air and the new budget iPad will be 10.5 inches with laminated display. Something like that. I don't know. Let's see. Bits, I know your stance on consoles, but 2 questions. Are you more excited for Xbox One Series X or PS5? Also, considering the current pandemic, do you think they'll just be fine in terms of sales? I think console sales have progressively gone down over the years, haven't they? Haven't less and less people bought consoles? To be honest, I'm not following them very closely at all. I have an Xbox and I don't use it, just because I don't do that much gaming, and the upgrades year over year are harder and harder to see the differences. Like I know that Unreal Engine 5 looks really cool, but the games that are running on it are not actually going to look that good. They're going to look worse, and then so I'm not really excited for one over the other. I don't have much loyalty to Xbox or PlayStation, so they're getting better, but I'm not following that market very much. Let's see, are UFOs real? Any number of things can be a UFO. A UFO is an incredibly vague term. All it stands for is unidentified flying object. If something flies by your head and you're like, "What was that?" That's a UFO. So yes, UFOs are real, but it's a different discussion if you're referring to, like, I don't know, alien spacecraft or something like that. I would say probably not. How about an iPad SE budget 10.3-inch iPad design with 2020 Pro specs? It doesn't seem like something they would do with the iPad lineup. Let's see. A bee can be a UFO if you don't know it's a bee. If it flies by you and you couldn't identify it, yeah. Yihirasawa, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub for 20 months. Holy cow, that's a long time. I do not have my Z Flip anymore. I did return it, but all the thoughts I have on it have not changed. So, Apple not innovating anymore. 2020 LCD for $800 and 60 Hz refresh. If that's what your definition of if 120 hertz is your definition of innovation, then enjoy your Xiaomi. But I would ask you when Apple did innovate, because everything they have introduced, there was some earlier form of. It's just Apple's never really been the company to introduce brand new technology. They've always been the company to modernize it or implement it in the best way. The iPhone was not the first touchscreen in a device. There were other touchscreens before, but they made it in a uniform, modernized way. Let's see. What's your experience / thoughts with the 12-inch MacBook? I liked it. I reviewed one a long time ago. I thought it was cool. It's very, it's not very powerful. I couldn't do much high intensive work on it, but in regards to form factor and lightness, it's incredible how they were able to make a laptop that small. What 2020 LCD is he talking about? I don't see the issue with using LCDs in 2020 if they work. I prefer my iPad Pro display much more than my iPhone display. And this is OLED, and that's LCD, because it's the buttery smoothness of it is much better than the slightly different contrast ratio on an OLED display. So it's like, use whatever materials you have to make the display good. They didn't introduce the mouse. They bought it from Xerox and then implemented it into their technology. So they didn't even come up with that. They bought that technology from another company. Apple did not invent the mouse, but they modernized it. They made it mainstream. Do you think Apple would ever release a cheaper entry-level MacBook with the transition to ARM? I think it would be nice for them to release a Mac that start at something like $800. I've seen that question so many times, but again, I think that if you're spending under $1,000 on a computer, they're going to want you to get an iPad. I don't see them working or trying very hard to get MacBooks under $1,000. So that's why I think even the ARM Macs are likely still going to be well over $1,000. I don't think the idea of making ARM MacBooks was so that they could make cheaper MacBooks. It was so that they could make more powerful Macs and have better control over them. Because Apple has put so much money and so much time into the iPad lineup, devoting iPad OS, and now they're working on Pro applications, and there's so many different variants of the iPad. Talk about, like, the Mac lineup is neglected. A lot of the time, iPad lineup is not neglected. My God, they put a ton of work into that thing. They got so many different configurations and storage sizes to choose from. We've got 7.9 inches, 10.2 inches, 10.5 inches, 11 inches, and 12.5 different screen sizes to choose from for one lineup. So I think if you're in the sub $1,000 category, they just want you to get an iPad. I don't think they care if you want a MacBook under that price point. Mac Mini is really cheap because there's no display or keyboard or anything. It's just, a box. Let's see. What do you think about Quo's report that we won't see the glasses till 2022 at the earliest? It's more believable because the more I think about what I imagine AR glasses being capable of doing, the more out there it seems. At the same time, I know John Prosser's reported on it, saying he's seen them and he thinks that they wanted to release it this September, but they weren't able to cut it, so they won't be unveiled until March of next year, which seems still soon to me. Um, but it's a huge medium. It's like the Apple Watch times 100, and when it comes to functionality and what it could add to our lives. So I think Apple wants to get it right. It sounds like something they would take their time on. So Quo is not great with his timelines either. But there are several sources, multiple sources suggesting that AR glasses are not coming out for a while. They're not just around the corner like we originally thought they were, but that's partially Ming-Chi Kuo's fault. I mean, Ming-Chi Kuo said before that production was going to start at the end of 2019. What all it does confirm, I think, is that Apple is working on them. They're absolutely real. They're in development, and I think they will come out eventually. I don't think they're going to out. I think they're not a shelved project. I think they're something Apple's set on. They're set on releasing this eventually. Whereas the Apple Car, I don't think that's a for sure product. I think that has easily been shelved or delayed or canceled altogether, and they just kind of investigate it, but they don't ever plan on releasing it. Um, the glasses, I don't feel the same way about. I feel like that's just a matter of time. They just have to get to the point where the technology is cheap enough, it's working fluently enough so that you can, put holograms on people's vision. And probably the biggest holdup is battery life. Glasses, anything that sits on your face has to be fairly light, fairly fashionable, and look okay. And anytime you try to do something that's thin and light, it's very hard to give it a decent battery life. So it's going to rely a lot on the iPhone for processing. It'll probably be very, very iPhone dependent at first, and over the years they might be able to make it more independent from the iPhone. But 2022 sounds very reasonable to me. I would be somewhat surprised if it was ready by 2021. Um, but yeah, no, the Apple makes the number one watch in the world, so that counts them as a fashion brand. Let's see, some bits from Overachiever. There was a YouTuber that brought up a thought I found interesting. If you look at places like eBay or Walmart, you can find an iPhone 10 for $400 and compare it to an iPhone SE 2020. I get support is a big factor, but what are your thoughts if someone only had $400 budget for iPhones? It just requires a bit more work on the end user. I've said from the get-go, like, yeah, if you're looking for a budget iPhone and you want to just buy the flagship from a few years ago, if you're willing to go hunting, yeah, you can find some great deals. Like Nick Sweeney from the Tech Podcast, he found an iPhone 10 in good condition that was like $300 or $400. It was something really cheap like that. But it's not a for sure thing. I don't know if Walmart has sales on them like that. I think it's more of a third party market thing. But when it comes to eBay and stuff like that, you kind of have to take a chance because you're buying it from someone and you hope that they're accurate and you hope that they have decent, ratings on that site. But yeah, it's not something that there's an endless supply of. You just kind of have to hunt for a deal, which you can save a lot of money that way. But there's a lot of people that just do not enjoy the hunt. They do not enjoy researching or looking up other third-party options or sealed in box options from sites that they could get scammed on. It's totally possible. A lot of people, when they want a new iPhone, they're just going to see what Apple has to offer. They're just going to look at that lineup and go from there. So in that way, I don't think that the SE is pointless just because you can find an iPhone 10 for $400, because I think that wasn't entirely the point of the SE. It was a big part of it being affordable and cheap, but another big part of it is there's people who are still using an iPhone 6, 6S, or 7, and they're not interested in learning new things. They're not interested in trying out a new screen size or new gestures or Face ID. They're just happy with their phone, and the only reason they want to upgrade their phone is because the battery life is bad, the camera's not as great, or it's broken and it's showing signs of age. So the SE is able to replace a lot of people's old phone that they were comfortable with, but just from time, it's become worse, just from the battery getting worse and the aging. So they don't need to learn a whole new phone. They don't need a brand new form factor, new display quality, new gestures and Face ID and everything. They just want the phone they originally had, but better. So that's what the SE caters towards. Let's see. My theory is the MacBook ARM will get more hardware aspects from the iPad, unified bezels, Face ID, 1080p webcam, because for the normal consumers, ARM doesn't mean anything, but a redesign will help, and I think they don't want to redesign it yet because the price hike would be huge with Intel chips. That's a good theory. Dexus, Emp. I agree with you. I think that's probably a safe assumption. I don't know how much I agree with the Face ID thing because I feel like Face ID probably has to get tweaked a little bit more in order for it to be laptop friendly. It works on the iPad Pro right now, but it's pretty close to not working because if I'm sitting too far away from the iPad, it won't work at all. So, but I guess you have to rest your finger on the Touch ID button a certain way. So maybe they're okay with that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think redesigning it for ARM makes a lot of sense and making it because, like you said, the average consumer can't tell the difference between Intel processors and ARM processors. So if they design an ARM MacBook and it looks substantially different and it doesn't look at all like the rest of the MacBooks, then people will be like, okay, that's the different one. That stands out a bit more. Will the Apple Car going to be outsourced to other companies, or will it be an Apple-made one? It No idea. There's very little news on that, and I think it's totally possible it will never happen. I think Apple researches and develops all kinds of projects that get canned or never see the light of day. They've always said from the beginning they believe there's 1,000 no's for every yes. So there's all kinds of projects they develop and design and make and then probably just say, you know what, this isn't good enough. It's not worth the investment. We're not going to release it. And I could totally see the car being one of those projects. They have the money to make prototypes and test out what they want to do, but if they can't really find a great breakthrough, they don't think the market, they don't think it would survive in today's market, then they won't release it. Let's see. Just finished your new space podcast. Is Randy not too interested in that subject, or was he busy? I don't think Randy follows it as closely as Nick does. Nick is kind of the host of the space podcast and Taylors of Space in general. He's kind of running that whole thing. And I just told him, hey, if you want someone to talk space with, I don't know if I can do it every week, but I'll try. And we just decided to start rolling, and we had a good talk about it. We were like, okay, we filled up the hour, so there's a full podcast there. It was just kind of an experiment to see if we could talk about it that long. I don't know how consistent we'll be with it. Probably not as consistent as the tech and EV podcast, but just when there's some new stuff to talk about, we'd love to go into it occasionally. We'll see. Let's see. Windows. Do you think the new iPad Mini will have an edge-to-edge display? I mean, not like the iPhone. Probably more so like the iPad Pro, if you mean edge-to-edge. It's got pretty thick bezels there, but you want them there so that your fingers have something to rest on with a tablet. Do you know any non-mainstream projects that Apple is working on? Nothing you probably haven't heard of. I mean, AirTags is kind of out there for Apple. I mean, they haven't designed anything like that before, and it's pretty much confirmed to be coming out, so that's something there. Let's see. I'm thinking about getting the iPad Air over the Pro for university, and I start uni next year. Should I wait for an update, or should I get one now, play around with it first? If you can wait, if by next year you mean 2021, because sometimes in the school system people mean next year is in like 5 months from now. But if you can wait, I would. It sounds like, based on what Ming-Chi Kuo and Mac Takara is saying, that the iPad Air 4 is probably going to happen this year. We're not exactly sure of the specs and the design and everything, but it sounds like it'll probably resemble an iPad Pro a little bit. But wait if you can. I would say wait if possible. Let's see. If Apple wanted to make a car, I see a Tesla or Rivian or some other car maker partnership rather than them trying to sell their own car. Yeah, I would see them partner too. It doesn't really make sense for them to do it. EV market is not super profitable, and Apple's investments now as a giant $1 trillion company, they're much more safe. They don't really invest greatly into big risks. That's why they pursued services instead of the EV market, because EV market they'd be losing tons of money on, and they would not turn a profit on it for years and years and years. Aiden5, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub for 17 months. That is commitment. Thank you, Aiden. Do you use Apple TV Plus? I'll be honest, I haven't. We watched a couple shows on there. We only finished one. We tried the morning show. I wasn't interested. I couldn't watch it. I thought it was boring, and I disliked all the characters. I couldn't relate or root for anyone. So we tried watching. I think we watched 2 or 3 episodes of it, and we just got tired of it. We were like, okay, everyone's yelling, everyone's mad, everyone's frustrated. Let's get on with it. And then we watched The Servant, which held our interest, but the ending of it was really confusing and disappointing and a huge letdown. So we were like, okay, that was a waste of time. We felt dumb watching that. And then that was it. I don't think we've watched anything on there since then. So come November, I will be canceling TV Plus, and I don't plan on resubscribing. Besides, half that stuff on TV Plus is free now anyway. They just started giving away a lot of it. So no, it's not worth $5 a month to me. Second gen Apple Pencil should be brought to the rest of the iPad lineup one way or another to phase out Gen 1. That I agree with. It would be really nice if the iPad Air 4 supported Apple Pencil 2 so that you could dock the Apple Pencil on the side. That's a huge selling point. Same with USB-C would be greatly appreciated as well. It's M. Night Shyamalan. What did you expect? He was actually not that involved. He didn't direct it, and he didn't do the script. Like, they kept saying M. Night Shyamalan's The Servant, but then once they showed the credits, it was like, wait, he's not filming it, he's not writing it, he's not directing it. How much of this, how much, I was like, how much of this is he actually doing? I think he just paid for some of it or something like that. You know, an Apple TV type box with an A12 4 gigs of RAM running Mac OS would make a better mini compared to computer than a Mac mini. Maybe if they do a ARM Mac, they can just let the Apple TV run Mac OS or something like that. I just heard that Apple just purchased the Next VR to start up VR company. What are your thoughts? Do you think they'll focus on virtual reality or augmented reality? Yeah, I don't think Apple's going to make a VR headset. I remember people saying that years ago, and it never happened. I don't think they see much potential there. They should. Apple's not tone deaf. They've seen smartphone companies try to sell it as a smartphone feature. Remember Google Daydream and Samsung Gear VR? They were like, "Hey guys, look, we'll sell these little headsets with our phones that you slide into, and then you can use VR." And no one did it, so they all stopped doing it. Google Daydream is dead. No one does Samsung Gear VR. VR is really only good for gaming machines, which Apple clearly doesn't care about because Steam just pulled VR support from macOS on macOS Catalina, which was not very game friendly on old third-party applications that didn't want to update their games for 64-bit. So Apple doesn't care that much about VR on the Mac. So I don't think they're going to make a VR headset. I think they bought them because a lot of the software and things you learn from virtual reality can apply to augmented reality, and they probably saw a few things that they felt like they could apply to Reality OS, which is the rumored platform for the AR glasses and stuff like that. So I'm sure it has something to do with augmented reality. I wouldn't see Apple buying that company as like, oh, Apple's making VR headsets now. Like, I don't think that's what it is. That's not my guess. They had VR support on the Mac, but it's gone now because not that many people were using it, and Apple wasn't trying that hard to support it. So, yeah, I don't think that's what they're doing. I also don't think that's worth their time because VR is quite limiting compared to what AR can do. So, I've tried VR headsets before. I've tried VR experiences, and they're cool, they're neat, but they're not the next big thing to me. They're just going to be a small niche of the market that's interesting, but not mainstream at all. Too expensive, too complicated. The I/O is too. The user interface is too limiting compared to, it won't replace all gaming. It'll just be a subsection of gaming. Some bits from Overachiever again. I know Apple TV Plus was a letdown and Disney Plus is great, but have you gave HBO Max any thought? It comes out later this month, and in my humble opinion, I think it's a serious challenger to Disney Plus. I mean, it's all dependent. It's not something like iPhones and iPads where we can compare tech specs. It all just comes down to what shows you want to watch. And I don't know any show on HBO Max that I would want to watch. The shows we watch are typically, they're either on Netflix or you can watch a bunch of stuff on YouTube these days. And we've been working really, really hard on cutting down our subscription services and shaving off every dollar we can. So if I have to get into a show by spending $15 a month, it's not worth it. There's nothing I can think of on HBO Max that I care about now. And I know that they're taking The Office off of Netflix at the end of the year, but I'm not going to sign up for Peacock just for The Office. So, in fact, I think people's viewership of The Office is going to tank after they take it off Netflix. I don't think many people are going to move to Peacock just for that. For those who don't know, yes, Peacock is NBC's streaming service. But yeah, it all just comes down to the shows you want to watch. And Disney Plus, I think, is a very different genre than HBO. Is a very like adult content versus family content. They're not even really competing in that way. I don't think there's that much overlap with those markets, and you can very easily have both. So they're not asking people to choose one over the other. Um, let's see. iPad OS will temporarily be better than Mac OS when ARM Macs come out due to software support, especially if they add Final Cut and Xcode to iPads. Um, well, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case because if they're designing pro apps for the iPad, that means they're redesigning Final Cut, Xcode, and Logic for ARM. So if it's coming to the iPad, it's coming to the ARM Mac at the same time. I believe that's kind of the point, that they're bringing pro apps to the ARM architecture, and they're going to show you how that benefits the iPad, and then also showcase here's the new MacBook that supports ARM, and it can run those apps as well. I'm pretty sure we'll get first party software support out the door, but there's going to be a bigger gap between the unveiling of the ARM MacBook and the delivery of the ARM MacBook. And during that time, software developers will have plenty of time to optimize their apps. Yes, there will probably be some late ones like Steam, Minecraft, Adobe. They will be slow to adopt, but over time. I imagine the ARM MacBook might have some hardware advantages, though, because it might be running a different CPU and different processor than the iPad has, and maybe it's a lot better than the iPad. Who knows? iTunes had Friends on sale for $50 for the whole series. On HBO, it's $12 a month. Also bought all of The Office for $30. Yeah, I've seen those deals and stuff, but the thing is, I've seen The Office so many times. I don't think I even need to own it. Let's see. Do you remember IGTV? I do. A lot of people still upload to that, but I remember everyone in the tech community saying IGTV was going to be the next big YouTube competitor, and it was going to be this huge thing, and then everyone just kind of gave up on it, and I totally predicted that. There's a lot of things I'm wrong about, but that was one of the things I was right about from the beginning. I was like, they should have launched it with the monetization program. They should have allowed landscape support. They should have redesigned IGTV for desktop instead of just tried to make it a mobile thing. Their whole embracing of the vertical only video was a mistake, and they admitted that later because now they do support landscape video. So yeah, it was they botched the launch of that, and it basically just became glorified Instagram stories. That's all it is now. It didn't really end up being a YouTube competitor thing. Boot Camp could still work on ARM Macs because there's an ARM version of Windows. Apple would have to collaborate with Microsoft. See, that's where my doubt comes in. If it involves them collaborating with Microsoft, and I mean, the main reason people put Windows on their Mac is because they need a software or they need an application that is compatible with Windows. And that's kind of the issue with the ARM version of Windows, is it doesn't support necessarily all the same apps as regular Windows. It can emulate them, but you take a hit in performance with that. So, let's see. What's on AirPower returning? John Prosser said it's 100% happening. No, I don't think he said that. Is so, how would Apple show it off? Good morning. We know we screwed up, but our team totally knows. Yeah, no, he never said it's 100% happening. He said it's been revived internally, and he gave some estimated launch times for it, but with a pretty big room for error. I mean, he gave a 6-month window of when it could launch, which is not very precise, and it's also not very soon, which I don't think they're going to release it because I think that would look bad, because it would have to open up all those sore wounds of Phil being on stage saying, "Hey, we know how to develop AirPower, even though no one else can do it," and they weren't able to release it. And if they released it now, everyone would just be like, "So why did it take so long? Why did you cancel it?" And it would make them look real bad. So even if AirPower is revived internally and there's prototypes of it and there's engineers working on it, I don't think that guarantees the product is launching. He said it's 100% happening in a podcast. I still wouldn't believe him. He gets things wrong sometimes. The Apple is a monopoly argument is such a dumb waste of time. Yeah, they're not a monopoly, that's for sure. So we figured it out 3 years late, but we did figure it out. Yeah, I can't imagine them launching it in a way that would make them look good. Any kind of way they launch AirPower, it comes out as bad because they launch it. It's $250 or $300, and then everyone complains about how expensive it is. And I've brought up all my criticisms with AirPower of it not supporting certain Apple Watch bands and stuff like that. Uh, so I I don't see how it would benefit them to release it. It wouldn't sell that well at all. No. I mean, some Apple sheep and YouTubers would buy it for the jokes, but any article, any news publication, or any YouTuber that buys and reviews AirPower will have to reference the time when Apple said it would be ready by early 2018, and they didn't meet that deadline, and they canceled it. You remember the iPhone 10 is dead video? The leakers, there's not that many leakers that just get everything exactly right. So don't, it's not an insult to their intelligence or their persona. It's just like people hear things and they misinterpret things all the time. I think this is one of those things. Um, let's see. As a fan of Android, the iPhone 12 Pro is really tempting if USB-C in promotion. I don't know where you heard USB-C. Prosser is the one who said USB-C is never happening on the iPhone. We could get a port of Minecraft Windows 10 Edition on Mac because it supports ARM, but again, Apple's got to collab with Microsoft. Minecraft does not give a crap about Mac users. They could have re-optimized Minecraft for the Mac a long time ago, and they still haven't. So, to support it on the Mac App Store or something like that, but they're still just like, yeah, Java's fine. You can use Java. So no, I don't expect them to be quick. Eventually, third parties will start optimizing their apps, but it'll not happen on launch. I think it'll take months and months, maybe years. At this point, I'd be happy with just a standard Apple wireless charger with the AirPower animation. Sell it for like $80, like the Pixel stand, for all I care. Yeah, it would probably be more than that actually, just for the animations. Their little Apple Watch charger puck is $80. So. Right when I got Apple TV, they removed Minecraft. I was so mad. Yeah, Minecraft does not care that much about how their game supports Apple products. So I would not count on them to have that ready on day one. They might get it ready eventually, but yeah, everyone just wants the animations. Everyone just wants to have the little iOS sound and the managing of the different chargers on the lock screen. That's all people want. They don't really care about the actual 3-in-1 charger. Microsoft can just port over the iPad version of Minecraft and optimize it for keyboard and mouse. Yeah, but you notice iPads have mouse and keyboard support, but the Minecraft game does not support mouse and keyboard yet because they're slow. They don't optimize things right away. Not saying they'll never optimize. I'm just saying it'll take time. So we've got mouse support, we got keyboard support on the iPad Pro, but you can't play Minecraft with a keyboard and mouse. They're late, see, because they don't care. It's not a big priority for them. That's not that much of their user base. So that's my point. They don't work to optimize these things on day one. I will buy a new whatever I need for those stupid AirPower animations. It does support keyboard, just only Bluetooth ones. That's stupid. But no, why would you support the keyboard but no mouse? I don't get that. Minecraft shaders on iPad Pro runs quite smoothly, I found. I didn't know they had shaders on the iPad. Probably doesn't run very well, given non-shaders doesn't run very well either. When Mac transitions to ARM and all the gamers are stuck on slower Intel PCs, there goes their PCs are faster's argument. Now all they'll have left is their too expensive argument. It'll come down to what the biggest problem is right now between Macs and PCs is that it's support. It's not that Macs don't have good GPUs or Macs don't have gaming capable hardware. It's just that they have very different architectures of software, between Apple wanting to support Metal and the PC industry being more about OpenGL and different codecs and stuff like that. So it's more of a software support thing. PCs are better because they're better for gaming because more games run on PCs, and not that many game designers want to optimize their game for the Mac, so there's not that much games on it. Ultimately, it'll still come down to that. As more and more Macs switch to ARM and Apple's able to bring their chip design to the Mac, yes, they'll be much faster than probably equally priced PCs, but they're still not going to have the games that PC gamers want. So That's what it will fall down to. Let's see. iMac with no chin would be it would be awesome. I'm using an Apple Cinema display right now to read this thing, and somehow this thing looks more modern than my iMac Pro, from the front at least. Still 1440p, one size bezel. It's a thick bezel, but come on, this thing is 10 years old. It still looks great. Everyone is talking about a ARM MacBook, but what if we all have misunderstood Apple's approach and we already have it in the form of an iPad Pro and Magic Keyboard? We would think that if there weren't any leaks suggesting that Apple's working on bringing ARM to the Mac, and that's what it sounds like they're doing. It sounds like they still care about Mac OS, and they want Mac OS to be its own thing, and they still care about iPad OS, and they want iPads to be their own thing. So they're going to continue to do both and just bring benefits from both to the other. So, iPad has gained a lot of Mac features over the years, but the Mac hasn't gained a lot of iPad features. So we're hoping in the next few years that can finally change and the Mac can get some things that the iPad has. We'll see. Also, Steam is looking to move to Linux as Microsoft tries to take more control of Windows. That's true. Steam and Microsoft aren't getting along that well either. iPad Pro dual boot iOS/Mac OS. They might do that, but they seem to draw the line pretty heavily at the last Worldwide Developers Conference of not wanting to merge the two. They just want to make both of them better. So they could do a Mac OS thing, but I'm guessing they're not going to. I think iPad is going to still retain iPad OS and Mac will remain Mac OS. If you had to give up your 11 Pro Max and get either the SE or any Android flagship, would you get it in a... Which would you get in a practicality standpoint? Well, the SE is new, so I could still do 4K at 60. I could still have iMessage. I could still have AirDrop. So all of my ecosystem benefits, also I could still use my Apple Watch. So I would still go with an SE over any Android today just for the sake of the ecosystem and the consistency with all of my other accessories. The only time I choose an Android over an iPhone is if the iPhone is so old that I don't even get the ecosystem benefits. So, some people are like, would you use an iPhone 4 or a Pixel 4? And I'm like, well, if I'm using an iPhone 4, I can't use my Apple Watch. I can't have AirDrop. I can't have, the things I appreciate about an iPhone anyway. So in that case, I'll just take an Android. But yeah, I would take an SE over any Android right now if I had to get rid of my 11. Let's see. Would ARM be an option or is a feature of a next-gen computer? I don't think it'll be optional. The new ARM Mac is going to be its own standalone thing. It's not going to be like you can get ARM if you want, but if you want an Intel-based Mac, just get a MacBook Air at that point. That's the option. If you want Intel, go with MacBook Air or MacBook Pro. If you're willing to sacrifice the software support and stick with the ARM Macs, then go ahead. What are your thoughts on the Unreal Engine 5 coming to iOS next year? I'm sure it'll help. I'm sure it will look great and run great, but at the same time, keep in mind, guys, I watched the video of the Unreal Engine 5 demo, and it looked really impressive, but a lot of the comments brought up good points of this insane amount of photorealism and detail is not going to be capable with games that have insanely large worlds and that take up insane amounts of space. Basically, the demo is not how every game is going to look. That's what it's capable of looking like, but that doesn't mean every game is going to look like that. And especially won't look like that on iOS. But, just games running better, good. Yeah, I'm all for that. But also put your expectations in reality as well. Not every game is going to run like the demo did. You hear the rumors that Apple is redesigning their logo? I wouldn't believe those. Do you think they will treat macOS ARM as separate to regular macOS? Yeah, I think it'll be announced as the transition. It'll be like a modified version of macOS that's kind of similar to Windows 10s or something like that, where it's okay, only apps that have been, on the Mac App Store can run, something like that. But yeah, I do think they'll separate it entirely. And I do think it's fairly possible they won't do emulation because some people think they should just emulate x86 apps for the Mac. But I think they might just tell people to move over. And if you don't move over, just get over it. If Apple open sourced AirDrop, they can finally make portless phones, tablets, and computers with new Bluetooth tech, making everything faster. What do you think about that? I've made videos on that in the past. I probably Hasn't been done for a while. I think it was like a year ago or something, but maybe 2 years ago, I made a video called AirDrop Should Be Open Source. There's not a lot of things I think Apple should make open source because there's some benefits of keeping it within the ecosystem. But if they let you AirDrop, specifically just with cameras, if I could AirDrop the footage I record on my Blackmagic cameras to my Mac, that would save me so much time. It would be so much easier. That's probably the biggest one. I can't think of much else I would want AirDrop to be on, but do you think Microsoft Office would come to the RMacs? They would run fine as Catalyst apps ported over from iPadOS? I think they will, but it'll take a while. Just like all third-party apps. It probably won't be at launch. It'll be one of those holdbacks. It'll be one of those things where it's like, yeah, you get the ARM CPU on the Mac, which is way faster and really power efficient, but the software compromises are you lose out on some third-party stuff. And Microsoft is not going to optimize their applications to work well on the ARM Mac on day one. They'll be like, yeah, we'll get there. We'll bring it out eventually, but it won't be instantly. Just like Magic Keyboard support on the iPad. Office is like, yeah, we'll work on that. We'll get around to it, but it's not their main priority. 4 bits from Overachiever. Do you think Apple will continue the non-AirPods Pro AirPods line of AirPods? Because part of the reason I love my Gen 2s are no soft part of the buds to lose and no need to buy replacements of those parts. Yeah, I think the regular AirPods are still selling incredibly well, and they're also a great entry point compared to AirPods Pro. AirPods Pro are a lot more expensive than regular AirPods, actually. I mean, if you're selling a $160 product and the Pro version is $250, that's like a big 30% like increase. That's a pretty big. That's more than that. That's like almost 50% price increase. So no, I don't think they'll stop selling the regular AirPods. If anything, it sounds like they might make a version of the AirPods that are cheaper than the current pair just so that they can retain market dominance. If they were able to lower the AirPods they sell right now, like the cheap ones, to $130 or something like that, they could really, really make sure competitors can't keep up. Should Apple monetize its podcast creator similar to how YouTube does things? Why hasn't that been done yet? I think I don't know, it can get real messy when Apple themselves puts ads on podcasts because then they start to become liable for the podcasts that are being hosted. But yeah, I would be in favor of something like that. The thing is, there's so many third-party hosting services that kind of do that already that it's not really that necessary. I mean, Apple, like our tech podcast uses Spreaker. I don't know them too well. Nick knows them a lot better than I do because he produces the podcast. But he contacted Spreaker because they were just like, we can put ads within your podcast automatically. And that's essentially what YouTube does, is it just automatically puts ads in your videos, and then we will reimburse you for that. So we have the closest thing to the YouTube monetization program with our podcasts that we can get. But yeah, if Apple built something in like that by default, I wouldn't be against that. I think that would be a lot easier. That would be great. Our Macs have to be able to run Crysis at 69 frames per nanosecond. Exactly. You're right, Yusuf. They need that. Still have my original AirPods from a few years ago. They don't last any more than a couple hours now. Yeah, that's a built-in design flaw of those little earbuds because the batteries in them are so small. So the smaller the battery, the heavier the degradation is over time. Add a wire and it will be $30 AirPods. Yeah, we have those. They're just called earpods. Was listening to the last podcast yesterday while driving, and it was an ad to slow down. It was so weird. Yeah, we don't really have much control over what the ads are. They just tell us they're not going to be anything like religious or political. I think those are the two terms. They're just like, you won't get any political. I could be wrong. It's something like that, though. They just tried to make it like family-friendly commercials of some kind. But we don't really have much control over what they are. But that's okay, because I'd rather the ad read be a different voice so that you know when it's an ad read and when it's us. It kind of annoys me on other podcasts when the host of the show reads the ads, and I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to be like, okay, I endorse it myself, so it's genuine and it's real and everything. But I'm like, look, if it's someone else and someone's trying to skip the sponsor and get to the main part of the podcast, you can hear when it's not me versus when it is me. So if you hear my voice, you're like, okay, the ad's over. And if you don't hear my voice, okay, it's an ad. It just makes it easier for the viewer at that point. I know I don't do sponsors on my YouTube videos. The only reason we have sponsorships on the podcast is because there's no built-in monetization platform. So if we didn't do sponsors on the podcast, they would literally make zero money. And I would be open to doing sponsorships if YouTube shut down their monetization program. Then I would be like, okay, maybe we have to, but at this point, I don't see that happening. So I'm not worried about that. There's already commercials on YouTube, so I don't need to add more to them. I seem to always have the same 2 or 3 ads on all the recent podcasts. Yeah, that makes sense. Why haven't I come across any ads on your podcast? I don't know, but congratulations. I'm glad you haven't. Joe Rogan reads like 6 minutes of ads and it annoys me. Always double tap skip 30 seconds to instantly skip your ads. Dollar Shave Club. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the ads either. But sadly, ads help the world go round because they do allow things to be free. The alternative to no ads is paid, which a lot of people don't like either, but it's just a way for people that spend a lot of time producing the content you guys enjoy to be reimbursed so that they can continue to do it. So it's kind of a necessary evil, but my solution to that necessary evil has been to try to be smarter and wiser with my investments and my financials situation so that we can get to a point where I can keep every dollar I earn so I don't have to do sponsorships on my channel and ad reads and stuff like that, because what I make from Google AdSense alone will be able to cover all of our expenses. So that's why, house is paid off. We don't have any debt. We don't get loans on anything. Just because we try to make sure every dollar counts. That's my goal. Mint may be open to sponsor you. Oh, I know they are. They asked to. They wanted to sponsor me. I said no, but the reason I said no was because I don't like signing a contract. Because that's what a lot of sponsorships do, is they get you into this contract of, we will pay you as long as you say these things, and I don't want that. But they were willing to just send me free stuff, which was really nice. I was really happy for that. I was like, I'm not going to sign a contract. I don't want any money. But if you want to send me free stuff, I'll take that. As long as there's no expectations with it. It would be different if they were like, okay, you can have this if you talk about us in a nice way. And I was like, nope, no guarantees. I might never make a video on you guys again, but I'll take the free stuff if you want. If you don't want to send me free stuff, that's fine. You don't have to. So they just literally sent us the iPhone SE as a gift. And I was like, thanks. That's great. That's awesome. And they had no expectations of me to talk about them, but yeah. Would you rather do a podcast with Elon Musk and learn everything he has planned, or Tim Cook and everything Apple has planned for the future and learn everything they're all working on? Elon Musk podcast, I think, would be way more interesting. And I have way more questions for Elon Musk than Tim Cook. Tim Cook is more of a business guy. He's not so much of an engineer what could Tim Cook really say? He would be like, AR glasses, and the iPhone's going to get thinner. I'd be like, okay, great. Elon Musk has all kinds of plans for stuff that sound far more interesting. Where's the OnePlus 8? Is it still happening for Mint? They said they would send me one as soon as they got them in stock, and they don't have any in stock yet because they sell phones directly from their website. So they said that should be sometime this week or next week, so I don't know when it's going to happen, but they said they would send me one. They might not, I don't know. I think that 12 Pro should just adopt the LCD in 120 hertz, just like the iPad Pro. Well, then you lose a lot of the saturation and dynamic range and contrast ratio benefits, and you can't have bezels be as thin with LCD, but I agree with you. I'd be fine with it if they did LCD. Tim Cook would deny the existence of the AR glasses. That's true. Tim Cook is much more camera friendly, and Elon Musk would let stuff slip out. He would just start saying things he shouldn't be allowed to say, which would make for a much more interesting podcast. Elon Musk said he was going to put an anime flag on the moon. I know, I saw that. Do you think Samsung or Google would try to beat Apple to the AR glasses? I mean, Google already tried with Google Glass, but I don't think Samsung or Google are going to work on anything that would do what AR glasses for Apple would do. But if they know it's good for them, probably not. I don't think they would try to beat them to it, because ultimately, like, iPhone users are the people that have, compared to Android users, like, Samsung flagships do not sell that great. Samsung's best-selling phones are all in the mid-range, like, cheap department. Whereas Apple can make fairly expensive phones sell really, really well. Like the 11 Pro Max outsold the 11 Pro. I think the 11 Pro Max in quarter one of 2020 was like the best selling phone over $1,000. So Apple kind of dominates the expensive phone department, and also the Apple Watch market is huge. So what I'm trying to say is iOS users are more likely to spend money on iPhone accessories, and AR glasses are going to be an iPhone accessory for the first few years they're available, or maybe permanently, I don't know. But they're definitely going to be an accessory at first. So you're much more likely to have success selling a iPhone accessory that's $1,000 or $2,000 because the AR glasses won't be cheap. Apple's going to have success there because there's a market for it. Samsung users, though, they're not going to be that willing to spend $1,000 to $1,500 on AR glasses. It's just not going to be that popular, or not much of that demographic is going to be interested in it. So, yeah, I think no, I don't think Samsung and Google will try to beat them to it. They might work on something once Apple glasses come out or something like that. But I think Apple will be not technically first, but somewhat first with the first reiteration of like modern augmented reality glasses. There's augmented reality stuff now, but it's not really mainstream or consumer friendly. And Apple will make it kind of mainstream and consumer friendly. What is the best physical product Google has made? Pixel Stand? Maybe Pixel Stand. A lot of people enjoy the Google Home Mini. I would think that's a really successful, popular product. Maybe not financially successful because they lose money on them, but a lot of people enjoy that one. That's pretty popular. Kind of controversial question. What are your thoughts on Elon Musk reopening the Tesla factory in defiance of government mandates? Yeah, it is a messy subject, but I mean, I don't think the mandates were justified because, I mean, the state was in favor of opening the factory. The federal government was in favor of opening the factory. The president, the governor, like so many, in all automotive countries across the country have been allowed to open and have been operating. And there's a ton of places in California that are still open and still operating. And it felt weird that they were kind of singling out Tesla and saying, no, you guys can't open yet because so many random places are open. Foster Freeze is open. Like ice cream shops are open. Do we consider that essential? I mean, from Tesla's perspective, making electric cars and accelerating, renewable energy, they would probably see that as more essential than ice cream shops. But the bigger point was Tesla had combated COVID-19 in Giga Shanghai, and they instigated a lot of strict policies with checking temperatures, not letting people come into work if they didn't reach certain health standards, and they installed dividing lines and dividing walls within the factory. And it turns out a lot of the Model 3 and Model Y production do not require people to be that close. They don't let people have lunch together. So they did a bunch of stuff at Giga Shanghai, and it all proved to be effective. No one died. No one got sick. And they were able to bring the factory up to speed, full speed, hundreds and hundreds of employees, and no one was sick, and they just operated fine. So no one was dying from that. So Tesla did that in the last couple months, and they were like, okay, we want to take what we learned from Giga Shanghai and apply that to the Fremont factory. And the county officials were like, no, you got to wait till June. And they were like, no, we don't want to wait till June if we're letting all these other facilities and factories in California opening up. And we have approval from the state, the governor, the president, the federal government. There's so much approval and so much like proved. But the county, with their statements coming forward, they were basically just like, who's going to buy a Tesla right now? You'd be surprised. They're still selling pretty good. The basic issue the county kept coming forward with is we have certain guidelines they have to reach, and we need to meet with them to discuss what those guidelines are. And they weren't meeting with them. They were just kind of saying, no, you got to wait. And Tesla was like, for what? What do we got to do? And they weren't really giving them that clear. They were just saying, nope, just don't open. We're not going to tell you what you should do, but you shouldn't open. So I understand the frustration. I don't know if necessarily opening against the county's official ruling was the right call, but I imagine Elon and the Tesla team probably has a much better understanding of what's legal and what the ramifications would be than I do. I don't really know what the legal ramifications could be, but I think it was getting to a point where it's like, okay, the factory has been closed since third week of March, and the county was saying they can't open until June, which was going to hurt them huge with both their goals of just how many vehicles they can produce in a year and also just their revenue. And they probably, the legal team and Elon probably got together at a certain point and realized, okay, the money we're losing from not operating is going to be worse than the money we're going to have to pay if we just open now and the county slaps our wrist. Because that's pretty much all the county can do. If they have state approval and federal approval and all that, all the county officials can do is like fine them or I don't know, go to court about it and say, Tesla should be in trouble, so we're going to go to court. And they have to pay some money for legal fees for opening too early, but the money generated from being open and producing vehicles will probably outweigh that. And even if they break even, Tesla was probably just like, we don't want to just sit around and do nothing because they're all about like, the future is now. Let's get these vehicles out on the road. We have orders coming in. We want to deliver them. There's a ton of people with Model Y reservations and a ton of people still ordering Model 3s because they do contactless delivery, so you don't have to touch anyone when you deliver the car. So I can see both sides of the argument. It just felt like the county was being particularly blind towards what steps Tesla was taking. Because it felt like a lot of people thought they just wanted to open the factory and pretend everything was normal. When that wasn't the case. They all had to take safety training videos. They only wanted to bring back 30% of the workforce. They weren't bringing everybody back. And they didn't require anyone to come in if they felt sick. If they told everyone, if you don't feel comfortable coming to the factory, you don't have to come to the factory. But that's not how a lot of people thought it was going to go. Let's see, what's the update cycle to the Model 3? They don't really have a consistent, like, here's when we update the Model 3. They just kind of update them when they can. Let's see what they should consider. So excited for the iPad Air update. It's honestly why I'm not sleeping to watch this. Well, an EV video should have just dropped, so if you want to watch that, we can watch that. Does the 10R or 11 stay in the lineup when the 12 series drops? I would love to see them both go to simplify the lineup. I don't think both will go. I've seen people going back and forth on what will go away and what will stay, but my guess is the 10R will stay because it's cheaper to produce and it doesn't have night mode, so that'll push people to go with the 12. Whereas the iPhone 11 costs more to make because of the ultra-wide camera, and the CPU is a bit faster than the 10R, so I think that would make it a harder upgrade to the 12, so that's why I think they'll keep the 10R, but a lot of people think they'll keep the 11. I don't know. Let's see. A little unfair to feel like Androids sell like crazy in the budget range because Apple doesn't offer $100 to $200 iPhones. If Apple did that, they think they could sell a lot more than they already do. Yeah, overall, Androids sell better across the globe than iPhones do, but only below a certain price point. It's like under $800, Androids are more common, but if the phone is over $800, iPhones are more common. So the bulk of Android sales are the cheaper mid-range, lower priced phones. It's not so much flagships. Android flagships don't sell as well as iPhones. They updated the Model 3 with the Model Y interior. In China, they did. Not in the U.S. Not confirmed yet, which I hope it's in the U.S. as well. I guess no one's posted one if they have gotten the updated. But yeah, it seems like Giga Shanghai is getting a bunch of exclusive stuff, which is kind of unfair in my opinion. But yeah, they gave the Model 3 in China. Wireless charging is built in standard now. And the USB-C, there's USB-C ports everywhere instead of USB-A like the Model 3 is in the U.S. So I don't know if they're changing that one for the North American model. They should, but they changed it for China. Also, China is getting the long-range rear-wheel drive option now. Those are in production. They got rid of that option in the U.S., I guess probably because manufacturing in the U.S. costs a lot more than it does in China, so the profit margin's pretty good on the Chinese-made Model 3s. So they have the long-range rear-wheel drive, which is the best one, but they don't sell that here. And I think they're getting the CATL batteries first. It sounds like I'm trying to do a lot of research on the battery chemistry because I want to know more about Battery Investor Day going into it. And it sounds like these dry electrode updated batteries, that can last like 1 million miles before they need to be serviced. And they're like cheaper to make and the can support higher energy density, and just they're better in every way. They're going to be they're going to be implemented on the Chinese Model 3s before they come to the American Model 3s. So, yeah, it sucks. I mean, good for China, I guess. China has a bunch of other problems, but Teslas aren't one of them. A few bits from Overachiever. I know this would be kind of funny, but on Unbox Therapy's other talk channel, he said Dubai, oddly enough, wants to equip their police force with Cybertrucks. Imagine how imposing a Cybertruck police would look. There's a lot of police forces that are using Model S's and Model 3s I've seen across the country because the cost of ownership, and they're quiet, and the police like that. And just the speed and the performance is something most cop cars have to have. They have to be pretty fast, and they're a lot cheaper to maintain than the what do they call it, Dodge Chargers that a lot of police forces have been using. So Cybertruck would make a lot of sense for all kinds of police. Definitely Dubai, but probably other places in the U.S. as well. Stainless steel exoskeleton. Oh yeah, those things are super intimidating. That would make quite the cop car. I don't understand what Unbox Therapy wants from Apple. Like, do you even love them, or you just want to hate them constantly? I think Unbox Therapy caters to the best sponsor he gets. He will pretty much endorse anyone who sends him free stuff. So he would probably change his mind on Apple if he got free stuff from them and got invited to events and stuff like that. But because they're not inviting him to events, and because they don't send him free stuff, he's mad. So he's just going to capitalize it on as much as possible, and that's why he does all the Apple hate videos or critiques Apple all the time. But I don't care. I don't watch him. He's welcome to think what he thinks and make what he makes. I'm not going to hold him to that. But anyway, I got to get going. Check out the new EV video. It should have dropped about 6 minutes ago. For those who don't know, I run an EV channel just called Talos of EV. Check it out. And if you miss part of this live stream, please check out Tailosive Podcasts on YouTube. We're trying to get monetized. It's a very, very new Tailosive channel that's having all the EV tech and these Twitch streams in video form. And you can watch them anytime. And I think we're at like almost 500 subs, so we're halfway there. And we just passed 2,000 hours of watch time. So channel's only been up for like a month and a half, 6 weeks or something, and we're already halfway there. So we're hoping in another 6 weeks we can be monetized. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.